So what we're going to do is completely change gears. We're going to throw your brain in a very different direction. We're going to think about creativity, data in creativity. This is a panel that we've seen once before, and they were so good, our team was so impressed that we said, we need to have you in Denver. So they're here. They're going to introduce themselves in a sec. And to bring them on is our very own Brandwatch rock star, Bex. So Bex, come on and bring your panel and introduce them, please. Whoop, whoop.
Thanks, Will. Awesome. Wow, my brain feels very full after that. I hope that I can focus on what we're talking about here, but I'm sure I can. So yeah, I just want to start by saying I'm so excited to be doing this. This is the first time I've ever hosted a panel, and to be able to sit up here with these amazing, intelligent women. I sat with them for about an hour this morning, and I could have sat there all day. So I'm really excited for this. We've got about 25 minutes, so we're going to be fairly snappy through some pretty big subjects here, and I'm sure you can catch up with these guys afterwards if you want to. But let's start out by
can I just also
doing
say
an
that we're
introduction.
missing one of our panel from Decoded, who pulled her back this morning and is upstairs resting.
Yeah.
So she cannot
Big
be with
shout
us.
out, everybody follow Decoded. All right.
Decoded.
Decoded on Twitter, they're brilliant.
Thank you. And also that I wasn't in the original group, so I am new to this, and you will hear some new things in this conversation. So I'm Alex Sinclair. I lead global creative content for IBM iX. And what does that mean? It means that I am the storyteller. I am the human face on technology. So I stand at that intersection between all the data and all the tech and the experiences that we create and make sure that they are human experiences.
Hello, my name is Joanna Pena-Bickley. I'm the former Global Chief Creative Officer of IBM. Have just left to start a new AI and design company called Thinks Machine.
Hi, guys. My name is Becky. I'm the author of the book Creativity and Data Marketing, which I think is all in your swag bags. And I'm also the CEO of a small design studio, innovation and content studio as well. We focus in on the application of AI, data, and creativity really in entertainment and marketing. So yeah, we're thrilled to be here.
Awesome. Thank you,
And
guys.
hopefully we offer a little bit more hopeful position of AI than the dystopian thing we just saw.
Fingers crossed. So data and creativity, it's a really big subject. We don't have much time, so we want to get tangible really quickly with this. So could each of you just give me one example of something that you think was really relevant or exciting that exemplifies what data and creativity means to you?
Yeah, I think every day that we have an unbelievable experience, and the cliche obviously is Uber. But for me, and something that we created, was cognitive mobility. And that was really using AI and using data to understand what people needed on the move in the car, based on their own preferences, so that the brand essentially could service them in the car. So if it was for Exxon, it would be understanding when gas was needed in anticipation of the fuel tank being empty. But not only that, bringing them into the convenience store and maybe closing that chasm between the gas pump and the convenience store, and suggesting to them that maybe it was time to have a drink. It was really putting the car in service to the driver. And to me, that was really an unbelievable use of data creating an experience on the move.
Awesome.
I think there's so many different applications. I think one of my favorite ones being led by Dan Goods out at JPL. So you guys, NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. One of the things that's really super interesting is all of the data that we're collecting. The reality is that we have more data than we could, as humans on this planet, ever process through. So I think as we start to take a look at creativity with data, it becomes, how do you become actually visualizing it, bringing the human into the core of the data. So one of the things that JPL has done with all the satellite technology that both NASA and NOAA own above the Earth, it's actually, how do you begin to humanize the data that's coming down? So, for instance, things like meteors. So one of the things they did was actually bring sculpture, right, together with data. The other one was satellites, like the Jason X satellite that's actually pushing weather data back and forth. They have actually created a sculpture that sits in the front of NASA today where you can actually see the data transfers both up and down in a really interesting way. And the reason they're doing that is so that what we're able to do is start to think about data in a way that actually becomes a fuel to other innovations.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really interested in the application of both in the company and brand building arena. As some of you guys know, Inner Brand talks a lot about brand being the gap between our expression of who we are as a company and what we actually do, right? So expression and experiences that we provide. And what I think is interesting in that process when, as marketers or people in the marketing groups or even people on the product team, I think of it as how do we have processes that work together to make that happen. So one example I love is Daddy's Car, right? You guys all read about it in September 2016. Sony, essentially Data and Creativity Lab, for lack of a better term, their innovation lab, created the first AI-generated song. Now, you saw all the headlines that says, can you believe it? They're trying to have AI make music. And really, it was actually meant to help map the creative process that artists, musicians go through, right? When they go through the experimentation process of copying different artists to find their own expression. Can they actually map that? And what I'm interested in is how it can augment human processes, right? So we saw Nick's amazing Go presentation, right? But if we had like AlphaGo enabling a person, I have no doubt, and I think it's been proven that the human or the AI-enabled human will win, right? So I think for me, I'm most interested in that space of enabled creativity or other way around, technology enabled by creativity.
Building on that, I think that one of the things that we often do, we think of creativity and data as two separate things, as opposed to, they actually don't need to be two separate things. And this idea around empowering users, right? If we think about truly about what user experience is, as a design technologist, one of the things that we constantly find is like, how do you give that user a superhuman strength or a superpower to help them do their job better, create or complete a task better? I think there's a lot of really interesting visualization, utilization of data in a way that's using everything from deep data mining to pattern recognition to almost diagnosis. I know that IBM works tremendously in the area of health where they're empowering physicians, right? To make diagnoses. In the area of automotive, one of the things that you're seeing is software applications being created to help the worker diagnose a problem in a heavily censored object like a vehicle, right? Or a piece of machinery. And I think that's where we start to see being creative with data, helping people complete their everyday jobs, making them easier. I always kind of look at it as like, we do a lot of mundane tasks in our everyday jobs, and if you could clear away the mundane to get down to actually fulfilling some of the bigger problems, that's the opportunity to be creative with
Well, actually, I just want to add to that empowering and bring it up to, we live in a sharing economy. And I, as a storyteller, and I come from print and copyright, and creativity to me, the sharing is the stories that our users tell each other. And for me, creativity today has really turned advertising on its head. I think that the user today is now the ad agency. I think that they now disseminate the product, the brand, because if we do our jobs right as marketers, they will have an experience that they will tell everybody else. They become the media, they become the platform, they become the account planner, they become the copywriter. And so that sharing economy really is brands being able to create those experiences through the data and through creativity. And to me, that is a new sort of definition of creativity.
Well, I'm going to go ahead. I want to just build on that a little because I think there's a paradigm shift in what we expect as consumers as well. I think that to your point around storytelling, actually, it's about going from those of us. How many of you kind of grew up in the agency world out there? right? And we were all chasing 360 degrees of communication. Well, the pendulum has swung so far the other way in that what I think the new and more modern marketer is looking for is how do I achieve 365 days of connectivity? And in there plays a role of story doing versus just storytelling. So I think that builds off of one of the things that it's really, I think, important that it is the immersion of both using content and taking it from where we were at mass targeting to mass individualization.
Well, I think you're right, because I think now the user is part of the experience, if you will. I like to see it as this sort of ultimate Disney ride that you're on, and the brand creates that ride for you. But you're part of it. You're part of the experience, and it's so powerful that you will actually help it go viral. So I do think that's an important differentiation.
And I will say that, while some of the roles of advertising may have shifted, meaning it's participatory and not a single communication, I think that there is a role for agency, for the marketing departments to, I think, be experimenting almost on behalf of the consumer, right? Like, can I help imagine the things too that can be done with my brand, communicate different ways I could do it, but also get the same back and be listening to, I mean, that's what I think everyone here is doing, is what is the insight, what is the strange ways people are using our products or services in their lives and in context, right?
Well, that's a good point, because you're shifting from seeing it as a product that we need to passively push to the user to a service that's actually going to make their life a little better.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, I'm going to move us on because we've been on this one for a while. So we talked earlier about examples of AI for good and AI for bad. So I just particularly wanted to throw that to Joanna first for some examples of when AI kind of goes too far.
When AI goes too far. I think when AI goes too far is when you're replacing the human ability to make decisions. I think that today, this AI, if you have a philosophy of augmenting intelligence versus replacing the human intelligence, what are the areas of automation that you can take advantage of? And I think it's really important that, as we talk about AI, you cannot talk about it in a singular context that's monolithic. There are three underlying currents that are happening. Number one, data is a new natural resource. At its core, we produce more and more of it every single day. We're just not able to actually process it. And really, the jobs of the future and the industry of the future are going to be how do we create these algorithms for our industry and then individually as our brands to begin to process this data in a way that it unearths insight and goes towards a brand purpose, right? If we bring it back to a brand place as opposed to just AI for good and bad. The second part of that is just understanding, so that's on the data side of it. You think about the algorithms that we write, and that we create is kind of the second piece of it. But I think more importantly, the thing that we're not talking about that we have to really understand is that all of the connected devices, as I look in the room, that there's so many different connected devices. You walk into connectivity into your home. And so the rise of the IoT as the primary communications vehicle of the next century, for us, understanding those things are actually inherently linked. So AI, data mining and processing, and the creative ways that we go about using design to problem solve for business. And I think there's an important distinction here. We're at a really interesting critical inflection point in human history. We saw it here in the presentation, but I think it even goes a little bit even more profound than that, understanding that we're living on a planet that's a little ill, right? And whether we like it or not, it's actually impacting all of us in different ways, from the hailstorm yesterday, right, to everything from rising tides. And this is where business problems and the world's problems are inherently linked, and the creativity that we need out of everyone in the room is actually producing really creative solutions at an individual and local level to bring data, creativity, and technology together.
Absolutely. I think what's also interesting, are you guys out there familiar with all the press about Cambridge Analytica?
Right.
And I think that what's interesting about it is that it's taking known psychological tests like Ocean, the Big Five factor, right? It's applying a data collection method, right, through a Facebook app, and then finding correlation, right? And so when they leveraged a well-known system we all use, like Facebook, to disseminate information, disinformation for some of us, I think the important thing is we have existing systems now that we leverage. It's not like one big supercomputer that we literally are going to plug into in, 25 years, according to Nick's chart, 1 in 4 chance, right? 25 years. That's not what it is. It's that we now have embedded technology systems that we already plug into, and it's a matter of plugging in some strategy, right? And executing in a systematic way that allows us to then see the ripple effect, the impact of what it is on us, right? So for some of us, it was a matter of 300,000 votes. For others of us, it was 300,000 votes well cast, right? The important thing is whether that's good or bad, I think it's some of that thinking, right? That as agency people or as marketers, how do we apply that both ethically or respecting people's privacy, right, whatever it might be, to convince people that they need to listen to our message versus something else, right? So it's instructive on some level.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, okay, sorry, I was just going to add to that. The difference is the design. I think that you talk about good and bad AI,
Intent.
but there's intent. Design is intent. If we go back to creativity and data, we call it cognitive. We call artificial intelligence cognitive at IBM. And we also say it's augmenting intelligence. And what it is really, if you think about data as crude oil and we're surrounded by it, cognitive gives us the ability to refine it and find insights and empower that creativity and create those experiences. So design is the differential between good and bad.
It is, but I think it's important. I want to swing it back to just a second because we just lived through this. And I think it's a little of the anxiety that everybody has around what does creativity with data mean? And creativity for good or creativity for bad. And I think all of us have a judgment call on what those things are. But I think when we think about our design principles, it's not about using psychological operations within our brands. If you have an agency or somebody who's coming to you telling you, I'm going to produce an algorithm who's going to change the minds of all of the Tide users on the planet, that's the wrong intent because you don't get to the outcome. And I think inevitably what we have to ensure that we're doing when we are thinking about being creative with data and technology is ensuring that the intent isn't using warfare on our customers. What we're doing is actually bringing them services in a manner that actually enhances their life, but actually doesn't put us all into a bit of a scramble, which I think we can all admit for those of us who kind of live in this oversaturated environment right now, that people feel a sense of anxiety. As opposed to hope. So.
But don't you think that goes back to really understanding, for products, really understanding and brands understanding the customer, taking you back into the data again? I mean,
I actually think it's about it's about understanding what the human need is. I don't think it's. I think as we look at customers at an individual place and just start with designing for the gaps in need. Right. That's a really interesting space. To begin and apply creativity with data. And I think the opportunity is so enormous. There's so many different problems that we can do. One of the things we talked about, which I think for all of us was, something of a lifelong passion around education, right? All of this information, but are we walking around with knowledge? So how are you able to scale knowledge in a way that doesn't require a 4-year degree and $40,000 a year?
So I wanted to come back to that to close, but we have about 5-6 minutes left. So I'm going to ask one more question of these guys, and then we can throw it out to anyone who has a question at the end. So what you were just talking about, what is the future for data within the organization, and what challenges do we face as a workforce and as a society to enable us to overcome kind of the challenges that come with potential of AI, people being afraid of it, and learning and education?
Yeah, I would say, for many of us in here I certainly studied statistics, but I know a lot of my peers and a lot of my design directors didn't. And that's okay, right? What we found is that having a basic understanding of, in many ways, statistics is the supercharged application of statistics across a bunch of data is the basis of a lot of machine learning, right? So what we've done is we've had a lot of our design directors actually go take a statistics course, right, and understand the basics of like technology and the language around it. For us, we've also been talking internally about creating apprenticeship programs of sorts, right, to just have dialogue about it. So for us, we believe if you can explain it, you're going to do okay, right? That means you have a fundamental understanding of what principles are involved. But the reason why I mention all that is I think that when we talk about what it is, it's easy to group it all together. And what we found is just by experimenting, for example, this is a conversation Joanna and I just had. When we've been experimenting, we try to use Watson for visual recognition, image recognition. And she was like, oh, Amazon's so much better. I was like, yes, we discovered that in experimentation too, right? So it's not like it's this arms race where everyone's like tossing out different technologies. Like you have to experiment, but you have to have a spirit of experimentation and a baseline of understanding.
And I think, I think experimentation is so critical. So I will take it to a place of lean into it. Do not fear it. If you fear it, you lose your job. It's really that simple. You fear it, you don't learn it, lean into it. How many of you guys saw Hidden Figures? Everybody saw it? See it, it's a must-see, and here's why. Because there was a point when they bring in the computers to NASA to replace the computers. And the one thing one of the core engineers did was actually lean into the technology as opposed to she figured out, wait a minute, I actually need to program this thing. And if I go and teach myself how to go program this thing, I have a job for life. And I think that's where we are right now, whether you are in the creative discipline, whether you are in the planning strategy. This is not about data creativity replacing you. We actually need people to elevate it in a way that the learning is going to come out of experimentation. It's about making things. It's about failing and fail. Everybody says fail fast. I say fail often. Because with every experiment, you actually have an opportunity. It's like, hey, you know what? We did that. Let's try a different way and a different method to do that. And I think one of the key things that we have in the next really 2 to 3 years with creativity with data is really about leaning into it and getting people to feel comfortable with it and bringing it into their everyday acumen around whether you are, targeting for a bar of soap or actually solving the new, the problem or a gap in the market with a new product with different kind of design.
I'll just add to that and build on what you both said. And I think that leaning into it goes back to, because I'm the advocate for the human, is understanding what that need is, whether it's your employees, whether it's your customers, whether it is the electorate. I really think that within the data lies the insights that help you to understand and ask the right questions, and only then can you be creative with design to create that understanding and those experiences, whether it's sort of educating people who feel left behind, understanding that teenagers don't want to do a 4-year program, maybe they just want to go out and actually start earning money and be sort of digital engineers.
So can we now hand it over?
If I might just say one thing. I had one of the agencies would collaborate tell me that his son had been programming since he was 13, and could he intern with our CTO? I was like, one, yes, free labor. Just kidding. But more importantly, what was interesting about it was not simply that the education piece. It's the fact that he needed to be in a context, which all of you guys here can provide, right? Of well, what's the business problem we're trying to solve? What's the societal problem we're trying to solve? And as a plug for our friend Liz, who can't be here, right? You have to create an environment in the C-suite level and actually in the director level, many of you guys here, of creating those types of programs. And it starts with educating C-suite and director levels itself, which is what Dakota does.
Yeah, I think one of the things Dakota does brilliantly, and I think is really becomes a blueprint how we get to lifelong learning, right? There has to be value in our corporations and our brands and in a way that takes in lifelong learning, because that is actually a very valuable asset to the enterprise, and Dakota does an amazing job of doing that.
I would say, if anything, what I think the three of us are, we're practitioners, right? So rather, predicting the future, if you will, is one thing, right?
Right.
But I think unless you get in there and experiment, learn about it, we had no idea. We were like Watson. We've been you guys did a great job advertising it to us agencies. Thank you very much. until we played with it, we wouldn't know, right? And I think that's how we're going to end up shaping this future so that we don't get into a world of paper clips, right? We still can participate before the singularity happens.
And don't fear the machine.
Yeah.
So I'm looking over to the events team because I know we want to run on time. Do we have time for questions, or are we going to direct people to these lovely women afterwards?
You're looking around, and I think they might be
They're out.
They might be getting lunch ready for you.
Yes.
There you go.
I think that to keep the end of the afternoon on schedule, we'll give these guys the round of applause that they deserve, and then